there's no one on earth that wants to have a relationship with me the way that she wants to have it with me right now.
Yeah.
And what could I do with that?
Yeah.
Testes. 1, 2, 3. I'm Kyle.
I'm Brandon.
And here we go. Here's our podcast.
That's right. The Dadabase.
I was going to say the no longer unnamed pod.
That's right. So,
Dadabase, or do you pronounce it the Dadabase?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Data.
Dadabase.
Dada?
Right. Yeah.
Not the daddy base.
Yeah, definitely not the daddy base. I'm happy that we have a name. What was the idea behind the name? Do you remember?
It was that hopefully it's a collection of resources for dads to leverage.
Yeah.
People,
stories, tips,
conversations, tips, ideas. Yeah.
It's good.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I think that, it captures our intent for what we're trying to do.
Yeah. It's hard to see a path forward because I feel like a lot of people are doing this at some basic level. Mm-hmm. But even though that part of it's scary, I like it because I think for so long, you and I have done this entrepreneurship journey alone. I mean, we're trying to build connection. You started a small group at church and you and I meet every other week and stuff. But still, man, if there's any limitation that I'm learning really hard, it's like not having others' gifts to lean on to get stuff done. I'm just not Elon Musk. But I mean, even Elon Musk, he's using people to do stuff. So,
oh yeah,
yeah.
I think everybody like the solopreneur is really. I don't believe in it.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, I've seen.
If we want to chase that rabbit.
Yeah, well, just for a second, I can see it being the case. For example, if you are a really good programmer and you have already distribution that's out there, right? Like if you have a platform where marketing your wares is fairly simple because the algorithm helps with distribution. If you have a good solid offer, a good product, you could do that. But if you don't have that, you're having to build distribution yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would take a very special human being to be able to do both of those things really well.
I think so. I agree.
Anyway, so this is for us. I would think, because we're trying to build in public. This for us is hopefully both distribution and product building, because we don't have a product yet, right?
No.
I mean, the product is essentially supposed to be the Dadabase of all the stuff we're learning, but all the people along the way that are trying to figure something out. But as far as what we're trying to figure out, we touched upon some interesting things last week. Have you had thoughts about our conversation from last week that has been sitting with you or has changed you at all?
I have debriefed a lot of just approaching specifically like less business stuff, but just specifically around fatherhood and the approach there, and the approach to the impact that we as fathers have on our children and their lives. Yeah. I think a lot about that. And so I think our conversation, I was in another environment on Friday afternoon where I was talking to a bunch of guys about planning for 2025, and we were just looking within ourselves and trying to identify like, what does that look like? What conversations do we need to have? What kind of thinking do we need to do in order to prepare to plan for the next year? And I think our conversation around this podcast and fatherhood primed me for that a lot. And so I felt like, okay, this family component, the dad component, was really top of mind. And I was really grateful for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I got to get your debrief on where you landed, because you kind of started that conversation in our faith and business group. And there's kind of a holding pattern where I'm so inspired, because I do believe that there's very self-limiting beliefs, very self-limiting. Yeah, it's very self-limiting, and those beliefs really exist hard in my mind. And there's a part of me that's jaded about, I would definitely want to hear more about how you're preparing yourself to do the act of vision casting and goal setting and all that kind of stuff. That being said, though, I like the momentum that was just built from that first conversation, because I'm still super inspired. The dad thing is definitely top of mind. Mm-hmm. And the more I'm sitting on like, oh, what does it mean to be successful as a dad? The thing we were kind of discovering around, their identity and their purpose and passions and all that kind of stuff. It kind of helped me to realize that I think for a long time as society, we operated on a very standard blueprint of send your kids to school for 18 years, send them to more school after that, and then hopefully they find a secure job where they'll be set for life. And I think that's sort of the standard blueprint. And I think what we're trying to establish is something that's different than that, because the world is changing so fast that for me, it's been outdated for a long time. But yeah, just today I realized I am trying to define a framework that's going to help. It doesn't have to dictate where we go, but I want to have a list that triggers me and inspires me to think, okay, well, my child right now who is desperately seeking attention, what are some things I can do to make sure that, but then also fill that love tank where I know she needs to be seen and recognized and loved. Yeah. And so, because it's such an open question, I'm like, hey, it doesn't matter if I don't make money from this. Like, if I have that answer, if I have that guide that will take me, until they leave the nest, it doesn't have to be 18. If they want to leave at 13 because they're already on business number 3 and they're responsible and they're an adult and all these things, I'm like, yeah, heck yeah. That's how we used to operate, I think. Yep. Getting married, starting your own farm. I don't know.
Yeah. It's the idea of like championing our kids. Like, we're raising them, training them, and ultimately when they're able to make those decisions, then there's enough trust built up between us that says like, absolutely go do that thing at 13 years old. Yeah. I don't know. Like, if they're ready to make that jump, then I just hope that I'm ready on my side too. And how can they be ready if I've not prepared them to be ready? Yep. Right. So I think in a healthy relationship, then I think it's different if our children are just like deranged, thinking like, hey, I'm going to leave the house now and go be a professional, gymnast or something. And you're like, absolutely not. Like, you're not thinking clearly. Right. But if there has been intentional work done and that's the conclusion they get to, then I don't know. It would be hard.
But I think, I think that's what's so interesting is that we can see this goal in mind. It's when we talk about it, when you and I are talking about it in this stage, I'm like, yeah, of course, duh. But then I would imagine if we really drill down deep, we can start to pick out different areas or maybe a rubric for are they ready or are they not ready? Sure. And again, not like a grade, like a report card grade, but what are some areas that we need to make sure that there's at least a minimum level of, what's the word for it? Capability, preparation, so that if they did decide like, hey, I'm going to go be a gymnast or whatever. Yeah. And I think, did we talk about this last time where I've seen guys who are like, I spent 6 weeks teaching my kid elementary school math or whatever. It wasn't that hard and it only took like an hour a day. Have you seen those examples? No? I've seen parents who've experimented in that way where it's, well, why do you need to spend 6 years in school when you can do it in 6 weeks and for an hour a day using a certain kind of protocol? And so it almost sounds like I'm excited to get like tips and hacks together, but I think it's worth questioning the timeline on which we expect things to be done. It's like the vision casting thing, right? I think because of how we've grown up in society, we're putting timelines to things that deserve to be re-looked at.
Yeah. I think you're going to challenge me in that way.
You mentioned
education
afterwards.
Piece, I'm like, this is going to be challenging for me because, we are public school right now, public school family. Yeah. And when I think about like the purpose of all of this, like, I think I have an inherent level of trust that like, they're going to turn out okay in some way. But also leads me thinking that my level of energy or input needs to be strategic in maybe other areas, whether that's faith, socially, creating like a service mentality or whatever. I don't know. So I think that's good because I'm like, that hearing you talk about like the math example was like, that's just a freaking no-brainer. Why don't we figure that out? Yeah. Like we should start that today. Like go. So that's good.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I know I have a way about me that likes to think about these things. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, oh, well, this is the ideal. And so therefore I can't accept anything less than not public schooling, But the reality is this past weekend, I was talking with Jen about like, man, remember that exercise we did last year where we just thought about one kid at a time and we're like, what does this kid really need? What's like their top number one need? And what I came to was she actually needs to go to mingle with kids more frequently and regularly. You know, it doesn't have to be a school, but she needs to exercise different roles other than the role that she's playing right now, which is like the second fiddle child.
Yep.
Or, you know, I think
Yep.
I mentioned already, she wants this attention, and she's behaving like her younger sister because she believes that's what she's going to get what she wants. But I've seen her in the classroom setting in the past where, you know, she's super helpful to the teacher without her even asking. And she was a part of like the it girls in her class. And these two girls were like fighting over her and stuff. And I'm not trying to brag about my kid. I'm just trying to say she is in this environment that's dynamic with different age groups and, you know, different things that she's exposed to. And so I definitely make the mistake of being like, okay, well, here is the ideal picture. And so if I don't live according to that and succeed at it, then I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm glad that you're not like that, because, you know, maybe I can live there in my head and start to put things to action that are practical from that and pull that from that space. But at the same time, I also need to be, you know, realistic about what I can do at this time. You know, because to be honest, if I had the money, I would probably just throw money at the problem right now, and I would send her to some sort of a private school or put together like a private group or something. Right. I don't know, something. But I am certainly letting my circumstances dictate up until now. Yeah. I mean, I've had this realization, so I want to change things, but you know, the circumstance of not having a lot of money, but
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Did you happen to watch that or listen to it?
I got like halfway through and I forgot to pick it back up again.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Did you get to the Jordan Peterson piece?
I did.
Did you hear that?
Oh, yes. I was trying to quote it to my wife and I butchered it so bad.
After we're talking about like our kids and the trajectory they're on, but he just brings up this idea. I do have the link. But he's basically talking about our children are born in like with this inherent desire to have a like a full relationship with their parents, and there's nothing on their side that's a barrier to that. Like there's nothing, like they want it. And that he just highlights the reality that like that is the one unique relationship that we will ever have as humans, where that's like 100% they are here for that relationship with you, period. And there's no other relationship we experience that in, whether that's our marriages or our siblings or even our own parents. Everything else is just complicated, and it's messed up a little bit with like qualifiers and contingencies and failures and all kinds of messy stuff. And yet our kids don't bring any of that to the table. They just want it. And I think a lot of times I view that as like they just want the attention, or they just want the entertainment, or they just want whatever. But I think at the root of it, like they just want me. And so I think Peterson, in some sense, I get the sense, I don't know his story very well, but I get the sense that like maybe he's talking from experience in not taking advantage of that and feeling like don't waste it. Probably a lot more there to unpack, but it's got me really, really, really thinking about like, holy smokes, like our kid, like the education is super important. I have dreams for my kids. I want them to have dreams. I want to see them succeed in life. But at the end of the day, like I just want to have the best relationship I can possibly have with these kids. And they may not live up to the expectations or the hopes or the dreams that I have necessarily. And just wrestling with that a little bit, and instead just trying to live in that state of mind and the presence of mind to say, man, how do I just steward this desire that she has to want to have a relationship with me right now? And there's the obvious like culprits that complicate that, like disciplining them and teaching them. One of them, they've been lying to us lately, so it's like not okay. Like, stop doing that, and then just practically how to discipline that, and just it drives me crazy. But man, like it's kind of rocking me a little bit of like, there's no one on earth that wants to have a relationship with me the way that she wants to have it with me right now. And what could I do with that? What am I doing with that? And we talked about purpose last time. Like, what's the point? If all the expectations if I throw all that out the window, what's left? And hopefully it's that relationship there with them.
What you're saying is so good, because what I'm realizing is that I want to actually throw the word education out, because for us, education is so loaded. It's such a loaded term with what we think is important. Don't get me wrong. Math, science, ability to write, these are all important, but it is generally in service to something, right? And I think what you're talking about is, what I think I'm trying to say, but I'm failing to say, is that when it comes to AI, where there's like a world where everyone's a programmer because all it takes is creativity, and the AIs will help build that app for you. I don't know if you saw
I finished it.
Okay. Another show notes.
We're going to riff.
Yeah. We're going to riff. But in the world where that is the reality, and you can just create anything by thinking about it, the metric of success is not about how well you can do math or how well you write. Even now, it's like, I'm going to use the crap out of ChatGPT. I'm going to use my thoughts, but I'm going to have ChatGPT organized in a way that I like. And so in that case, it's not about the skill of writing or the skill of math. It's about kind of at least generally knowing how it works, and then using your judgment, your human judgment, which I think there's creativity associated with that. Not just creativity in terms of your own taste, but like being able to be empathetic enough to know like how other people would react to that, for example, or how one would need to have this package to receive that. So even that for me, I want to redefine in terms of like, how, like, a metric could be like, well, how often were they in flow state this today?
Yeah.
Right, where they were just in an activity because it was so interesting to them. Right, or like, how did they pick themselves up out of a funk? Or how did they behave when they were confronted with the being caught in the act of lying? Right.
Yes.
So I mean, these are all, I think, the meta skills that are going to be, they've always probably, I would arguably, been more importantly, it's just been overshadowed by whatever the age we're coming out of is. But I totally agree with you. The reason I don't like the idea of public school, and I like the idea of keeping them home, is because in some weird way it puts a pressure on me to figure it out, to make most of my time. Because I think the public school thing is, if we're extrapolating and thinking, okay, well, the teaching part of it is arguably like doing the opposite of what we want.
Right.
Like, if you think that school was created for the industrial age where you're learning compliance and making a widget, and we're totally shifting to, we don't need to learn how to be compliant at all. In fact, we need to learn how to question everything and create brand new things that only we as humans can do. Like, there's that side of like, oh, well, I don't want it to do the harm that it might cause. I'm not saying that your public school or whatever it is. I want to put it out there. Public school is great. It's necessary in this day and age, is what I would argue. But I also think that that's a lot of time that could be spent. Not that they say we have to use every minute of it to train their brain, but rest is a part of learning and education. That, how do I teach that to my kids?
You show it to them. Well, I guess that was like a really quip. Of course, show it to them.
Totally. As we're like anxious every day, like, how do I make money to feed my family?
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm glad that we are still at the early stages. I mean, my friend who has got older kids, he's saying that around like the 4th or 5th grade for him, his 5 kids, that's when they're starting to really kind of like have their own real distinct color and whatever. And before then, it's like, at least according to what I'm hearing from him, and it's just one person, is that you've kind of got time to figure that out. And so I'm hoping that's enough time for us.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to believe it is.
That makes sense. I have another idea for you in this vein.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Bucky's?
Have I heard of Bucky's?
What do you think about Bucky's?
Bucky's is the best. It feels like an amusement park every time, even though it's just a massive gas station.
Yeah, and have you heard about their 2 non-negotiables we will not lose on these fronts of our business? Have you heard? Culturally, they have made 2 commitments that they will have the cheapest ice you can buy ever.
Yeah, go price it out. Like
Apparently, go buy a bag of ice. It will be the cheapest at Bucky's, hands down, every time. And next time you go, you're going to realize, like, I've never seen so many things of ice, like the containers.
Okay.
Like one convenience store might have one, maybe two. But they've got like 20. Like the whole front of the building is just the ice.
Now
freezers.
that you've said that, I know that I've always known that the ice was there, but I'm like, I never really paid attention to it. Yep. But now it brings on a whole new thing.
The other one is the cleanest bathrooms.
Oh.
That they have committed that they will have the cleanest bathrooms out of, like, in the gas station, on the interstate.
I do love that.
And I do believe that.
Yep.
I have not tested the ice. Like
the bathrooms, I so understand, because it, like, any traveler knows.
And if you see their brand, I can trust.
Yes.
That, like, that's going to be a safe, clean place to stop. And I guess gas stations, they just sell a lot of ice, like whether that's like you're loading up for your cooler or your whatever. Yeah. So
that makes sense.
Those are the two things that they refuse to lose at. And
sounds like the Costco hot dog.
Maybe.
Oh, shoot. I forget. I thought we talked about this. But yeah, this is kind of a similar story where I think someone was proposing in Costco, like, hey, let's, just make it a little bit more expensive and then this will happen. And the higher ups were like, hell no.
Huh.
We were not changing the Costco hot dog. So like they ended up like making it all in-house to bring down the cost. And it's still the $1.50 Costco hot dog that we all know and love.
Yeah. It just made me think, like, okay, part of their culture, their values as a company, and like their commitment to excellence in two ways. If you try to run a business and be the best at everything, you can't.
There's no way.
Can't. But if you can win on the bathrooms and you can win on ice, then have you done enough to get the loyalty? People think about the clean bathrooms and maybe they appreciate cheap ice, but they remember all the other stuff, like the beaver nuggets and the brisket tacos, like the crazy stuff you see in there, but like they've built trust all around, a couple things. So to bring it back to like what we were talking about, it's made me think about, I've thought about that in the business world several times. And, I've heard businesses take those principles and apply them to theirs. Like, we're not going to lose we're going to always win. We're going to win on these fronts and we're never going to lose. And if we lose there, then like, that's a big deal. That's like, owners need to know about it. Somebody's getting a phone call. And I just thought about, like, what would that be for me as a dad? Like, what are the 1, 2, 3 things that I'm not going to lose at? And I may not get all this other stuff right. We may win some, we may lose a lot, but at the end of the day, what are the high leverage things in this relationship with my family that I'm not going to lose on? And I don't have an answer for that right now, but I've got lots of ideas. They seem like they could be helpful, but I just have to figure it out, practice it.
May I say, I was having a conversation with my buddy today, and we were kind of talking about this, all the tensions of like parenthood and being a dad. And it's like, oh, I'm doing this, but I feel like I suck. As we were just going deep into the throes of the, what we need as parents and what we need to do for each kid and all the hurt and stuff from not being able to meet everyone's needs. Like, the clear answer that came to both of us was like, yeah, money would make this a lot easier. It was like,
I have to win financially. I got to win.
Well, because like in my head at the time as you was explaining that, I was like, if I didn't have to worry about money and I could just simplify it to, okay, this is the most expensive. I did a little bit of research and it's culturally, they say it's the best. And then it's just like, let's just do it. Let's try it out. Why not?
Yeah.
But like, we're having to manage the tension of like, oh, well, I can't afford college tuition for daycare. So like, how do I find, the affordable one that has someone that cares and, like, will they be able to, and just introduces all this complexity to this issue of like, where can I send my kid to interact with other kids and hopefully a decent adult that will, help guide them when I can't. And it made me appreciate, like, okay, well, I see why, the man role of being the breadwinner and like that being the number one role and just simplifying it to that, like, does solve a lot of headaches, And it made me feel a little hopeless a little bit.
Well, we don't want that.
Oh, yeah. And at the end of the day, like like if I really were to take that to the extreme, we've also met plenty of people with tons of money, and it just introduces a lot of things that can, really spoil the relationship and the sense of morals and purpose.
Well, then you start substituting the money for the relationship.
Yeah.
Like you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, it wasn't the answer. That being said,
yeah,
it's not one I would discount anymore either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, that being said, so I want to hear your ideas that you've been throwing around in your head, because I like this. I mean, it's weird because you would think that someone like a Costco or Bucky's, it's not like they don't have other priorities and objectives, right? Like Bucky's, they have the most diverse range of stuff, like barbecue and fudge and all kinds of merch, and so it's like they have, that takes a lot of effort.
Yep. And
they're doing a great job, but it makes me wonder like what the maniacal focus on these two things has to do with the rest of the business. I think it's similar to what we're trying to do here, where it's like, if we can win at content, then everything else comes easier. And we can be more excellent at customer satisfaction and, giving gifts, even though we're not doing business with them in the next few months or whatever.
Yeah. It's the non-negotiables, I think, to the business. Yeah. It's the non-negotiables, and we're going to win at these. It kind of reminds me of, what's his face, the Atomic Habits guy. I forgot his name. But, obviously he talks about habits, but it makes me think about, like, what are your highest leverage things? What are the levers you can pull to create the biggest amount of value or impact? So for me, like, what are those things for our family that will do that so that I have the very best relationship with my kids? Okay, so if I'm thinking through that lens, to take advantage of their desire to have an incredible relationship with me, what does that look like? I'm in a season right now where my phone sucks life away from me. It robs me, it robs them. And it's kind of scary, but what if 5 to 7 p.m. was like, Dad's phone is off or in another room or away? And that's like, I'm not going to lose that. If I commit to not losing those 2 hours to my phone, who wins? And it's hard because I'm like, well, I might get a client call. Like, I might have to, there's $1 million house I'm trying to sell right now. Like that's a huge paycheck for me if I could, if it comes down to, and I'm like, but how often does that happen? Like, not very often. So what are some safeguards I could do? I could probably figure that, but I haven't committed to that yet. Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay. So like that's an example. Or maybe it is like, I met a dad once and he does like a one-on-one coffee breakfast with each kid every week. And he did that with his daughters from like age 6 till they left the house.
Dang, so he started drinking coffee from 6 years old?
Well, they were like, Dad, Starbucks was putting in a new coffee shop by their house. And they're like, Dad, is that going to be a Starbucks? And he was like, yeah. And, they're kids are like 6, 7, 8 years old. And they're like, they don't drink coffee. But like Starbucks to them meant like time with Dad. Oh. And it meant like, and at first I think it started like in the drive-thru because he just needed his coffee. And then it turned into like, oh, they would get a breakfast or they would go inside and play a game or whatever. And it turned into like, oh, my teenage daughter wants to talk to me. Like, I'm not giving this up, like I'm going to, so it's like, okay, so that was his, but what are the things I don't want to lose at?
I really like that as a starting point though. Cause like just carving out non-negotiable time with your kid, knowing that they have that to look forward to every week. And so it's like, even if you can't get to them in the moment, they know it's like, okay, well, this is important to me. I'm going to have coffee time and we're going to talk about it. We're going to do it.
Dad knows that he's going to take me this time every week. And that's our time. Yep. And it's like, okay, sure. Examples that we're like, oh,
that's really good.
Maybe something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love that.
Or I thought like, another good one that we do is like a nighttime ritual or something.
Like a bedtime story kind of thing.
Did your kids watch Daniel Tiger or listen to him?
Yes. Not recently, but yes, they have.
And anyways, he has a song that he sings. And so Lucy's been singing this song, but it's like, there's a get ready song and there's like go to bed song. But the go to bed one is like, PJs, brush your teeth, all the things. And I'm like, yeah, But to like do that with your parent at that age, she's going to outgrow that. But right now it's like, that's an interactive time of our day where like, I so wish she could go upstairs and get ready for bed by herself right now, but like I do not trust her to do that. Like she will not do it on her own. She will get lost along the way and destroy something, and toothpaste she'll write her name in toothpaste on the mirror. Like it will just be a disaster. So I have to be there anyway. So it's like, how do I make that into a ritual that's like, we're doing stuff together that she needs to learn to do developmentally. What would that do for me to shift my thinking of like, how fast can I freaking get this done? Because I hate it. It pulls all of my patience, and it's so hard. But turn that into like, no, we're going to make this into a ritual tradition, and maybe we incorporate our prayer together, make it special for her. So those are some of the things rattling around the head. So
I love it. I mean, I already am like, this is why I'm supposed to have date nights with my wife, and I don't do that regularly, and we so need to carve out time for our kids individually and possibly together and all that stuff. And it's not that I don't do some of it, but I don't really do it. I don't do it to the point where it's like, this ice is going to be the cheapest ice on the market. You know, I'm going to make sure of it. And I don't do it that way. But it does make me wonder how important it is to choose those, because I would imagine choosing those non-negotiables should have a knock-on effect, right? Like, because if I had a rest stop and I was just like, I'm going to beat Bucky's ice prices, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be at Bucky's, right? I don't even know.
But if you win at that, can you put all of your other, if that's a non-negotiable, you don't even have to think about it. It's kind of like the Steve Jobs uniform.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to wear the same black turtleneck, jeans, tennis shoes every day because there's a whole lot I want to put my energy towards other things. If I'm going to spend mental capacity tinkering or thinking or working, then let's carve out the 2-3 things that like non-negotiables. We're going to nail it every stinking time. So I need to show up and you got to be present for it. I got to clean the bathroom. But that there's a system and it's done. Now let's go put our time and energy into like crafting a new taco. Or branding or better advertisements on billboards or whatever it is. And like, if those don't win, okay, we'll just move on to the next one. So I think it's like, that's why I went back to the Atomic Habits guide. What are the highest leverage habits or systems that we can put in place to where we make sure that we win in those arenas so that we can use our creative energy elsewhere, and it's not going to make or break us.
Yeah, what I like about your idea around spending this time or having this ritual where you're present and not distracted or feeling like you're pulling teeth is that, well, I would imagine with Bucky's, like you were saying, for weary travelers, ice and bathrooms are possibly the top, like two of at least the top 5 things that they are looking for. And with kids, to Jordan Peterson's point, they are the most ready for that unadulterated, fully present, being attuned with my needs, parent. That's like the number one thing for them. So making sure that that's done, like being the best in the market at that for your kid is super important. If I have ideas, I'm going to do this, by the way. I don't even need to like think about more
Open
ideas.
a gas station.
Yeah, absolutely. Have the cheapest ice. No, but like, coffee and breakfast or something where,
what's good for y'all.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so then let's pivot just a little bit. Cause
I want to hear what
what?
Sorry.
No. Pivot isn't like, not totally different, but you and I right now are really struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And I know that there's no benefit in thinking about it that way, even though that's the reality. I mean, I think for me, I just know that I need to operate and know that my needs are met. Even though this entrepreneurial journey, it's like there's nothing certain, everything's up in the air. It's the whole staring into the abyss, chewing on broken glass thing, right? Where everything is a problem. The biggest problem are your problems. You can't get away from it. That being said, do you have an idea of what that would be for, I don't know, your business or this idea of meeting provision? Like not meeting provision, like fulfill, like getting provision. It's hard to say because it's like with this entrepreneurship thing, it seems like you have to go out and get it. But like provision means God provides.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I guess, how do you prepare yourself to receive it?
To receive.
And do we need to? Is the act of preparing a lack of faith in that general direction? I mean,
I think. Clarify the question for me, because it's pretty open-ended, and I can go I want to make sure that I'm actually answering the question that you're thinking of.
Say we figure out the Bucky's ice thing with our kids, right? And I'm sure it changes season to season.
Sure.
But say like, the one...
Time out.
10 minutes in the loft, please. Oh, crap. Let me go get the gate, and I'll be right back.
Yeah.
So sadly, the girls have pretty much dropped their nap.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, she naps every now and again, but like now that Izzy's in a big girl bed where they can each see each other and they can egg each other on. Izzy's pretty much dropped it.
Yep.
Mammy still naps here and there, but yeah, this is the routine. Like we put him in for quiet time basically, and they come out.
Yeah.
And
we live there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Good. Mm-hmm. So so we figure out the Bucky's ice thing for the kids. You know, in essence, it's like that leaves hopefully more room where we're able to focus on this other area of our life where it's like, how do we do the same thing for our calling? Let's just say it's calling.
Okay.
Right? Because I think up until now, the reason it hasn't worked is because we felt like we had to be master schemers to make money. But I think what we're trying to uncover through this podcast is that we want purpose and what is it you were saying? Like meaning to be also mixed in with.
I think at any endeavor I set out to go do, it needs purpose behind it. It needs to be something that I'm willing to go invest a bunch of time and energy into to lift something.
Yeah.
And it be worth the endeavor regardless. And I think if we truly do that really well, then we put enough value out there, there will be maybe it's in that pursuit that we are creating that posture of receiving the provision for it.
Yeah. So what is that? Do you have any idea of what that might be? That atomic habit, or because I mean, your real estate is like a meaningful gig.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for me. But even within that, right? Like if I just said like, yeah, I am a real estate professional.
Yeah.
I'm going to file my taxes that way this year. Right. Blah. And that's kind of why I am where I'm at. Because I've tried 10 of the 100 and none of them are quite working the way that I really want them to work. And so it leaves you feeling like, how do I be authentic with me? And then this is just the way that I help people, like when they need help.
Gotcha.
And here's something in the tool belt. So what are the things that I need to do in business this next year to win or to open myself up to provision? A lot of that is like niche. Who's my client? Who's my ideal client? Who's not?
Yeah.
Like so much of that. It's niche, it's market, and then for me, it's relationships. The activities that I'm doing, am I actually cultivating relationships with them? Or am I just looking for transactions? Am I just looking to generate leads, or am I generating relationships? So that's been part of it too. So if I compare myself to other agents, then that's where it gets a little dicey and hard.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm not going to win on YouTube. I'm not going to win on social media probably, or brand or whatever else, but can I win on like quality of service or compassion or answering the phone? Like one business that I talked to, they're a moving company. And this is actually the guy that told me the Bucky story. So he runs a business called Square Cow Movers. One of their metrics that they answer the phone. And he knows every week as the owner how many phone calls got missed for the company from the phone directory. Another one that they had was like, we're not going to break TVs, we're not going to scratch floors, hardwood floors, and we're not going to scratch or ding refrigerators. We do those 3 things. Those are our non-negotiables. We're going to win on these 3 or 4 things. So for me, it's like, okay, well, maybe that's relationships. It's a really targeted niche market. My neighborhood, I'm going to be a really good neighbor to my neighbors. And if somebody needs help with real estate, I hope that I've developed the relationships there in my neighborhood where they want to ask me to help them, that they know I'm a realtor and that they would want my help because I'm a resident, a neighbor.
So it answers my question. I think I'm just wrestling with how do I like it. I like this idea of simplifying it down to one really important metric. I just have a lot more questions around it as I'm hearing about how to apply it in the context of
business.
Yeah. So,
well, maybe that's something we need to think about with this endeavor we're going out on. It's like, what are we going to win at? What are we not going to lose at? And that could be frequency. It could be consistency. It could be a matter of creativity. I don't know.
That's
other voices, quality, a lot of stuff.
It could be. I think what helps me to think is every time this subject comes up, I get very excited about it because I feel like there's a lot of problems that if they don't need to be solved, I need to know answers to.
Yeah.
Right. So like, education, we talked about it to a certain extent, but there's this interesting chart that I've been listening to a lot of Mark Andreessen lately.
Okay.
And I didn't want to overload you with all the podcasts I've been sending you, but like the one I listened to today was just an astounding overview of everything. But he wrote the Substack, I think it was last year, where how he talked about how AI will not cause unemployment or something like that. But there's this one chart that shows inflation, and inflation is measured with just a bucket of goods, and how they measure that is, I don't know, it's weird, but like he was showing a chart about like how, like what's affected in terms of what's the most inflated in terms of price and what's kind of going down because as technology gets better, things are going to get cheaper, right? And that's just how we are supposed to be living in this deflationary world, but what the heck is keeping up the prices? And the top like 3 most inflated things is healthcare, education, and what was the third thing? It was very important. Healthcare, I think housing, right? Like kind of all the most important things in our life. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, the only reason that these 3 things are going up is not because we don't have the technology to fix a lot of it. It's because there's a lot of regulation that's getting in the way of us doing this properly. And so when I think about what we talked about, this education thing, it's like, well, goodness. I mean, if we can't have it done through governing bodies, then we have to, like, there has to be a bottom-up approach to this thing. And I mean, education, like, again, I don't like the term anymore.
Yeah.
But like, how do we raise our kids to be ready for a future that's going to be vastly different than the one we know, When I think about that, I think it's a combination of laying out all the questions. I think we're doing a good job of that. Like, well, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a successful father? What do our kids really need to learn at the end of the day? And then being able to like publish, to ship it. For me, I think it's like if we had something like we ship a piece of content every week, that puts me on the hook to deliver on something. And I think that this is true, but it's hard to keep that focus on it. The struggle that I go through is that I know that the act of putting out content is very important, but like sometimes I don't know what it's for other than to try to have an insight or to
win attention.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
It
It just feels icky because I'm not using it to do something.
Yeah.
Like put out a course or sell a house. It's not attached to something where it's like I can make that thing better.
Yeah.
And so I think that's my biggest question is like, I know that the practice of us doing this is super important, but what are we really going to do?
Yeah.
So this is sometimes what I struggle with like small groups at church. I know that the Acts church model is like, give to each other as need and stuff like that. But like, there's gotta be something driving, the body, the church, like I've been hearing a lot about Elon Musk through Mark Andreessen. And he's like, well, every week he solves a problem for these companies. He solves a real bottleneck for these. And he goes all the way to the ground floor engineers and he focuses on it. He knows what he's talking about. And he knows how to deliver on solutions. But at the same time, he's got really lofty missions of like being able to
do stuff on the moon.
Yeah. So it's like both things. And so I can't just leave it at, if I just produce content every week, things will be great.
Yeah.
Because I've done this path and we've produced content and my wife no longer wants to produce content anymore. So I guess that's what I want to think about with Dadabase is we generally know what we want to get people involved in, but like I also want to know what the success looks like in terms of that. Hopefully you get what I mean.
I do. It's a forcing function for clarity. What are we doing?
Yes.
Right? So we're going to force that. And then if this is to go anywhere, then it needs to become more than just Kyle and Brandon just talking, having a conversation. We're going to have these conversations anyways. We're going to record them now. What's the next layer to that? What's the intentionality behind it? And I think that it's not too unsimilar to what I was trying to communicate around in real estate. It's like, it's the for who and the why. We have the why, but it's the for who and like, what are we helping with? And
let me ask you, is there a way to combine, because you're saying like there's so many ways to do real estate and relationships are your thing. Yeah. I like to create structure and a frame around whatever that is. Is there a way to combine the two where, like there are other people that want to be good dads. And so maybe, just like the dad group, is there something that you and I could start to just experiment with? I really like the gathering that you have through church of the young families meetup. Yeah. Like every time we go there, it's so life-giving and it really meets a need that I think is so good. What if we did something like that, but we leveled it up somehow? Maybe we hire a clown or do like a fitness event for kids or whatever. I don't know what it is, but maybe we can start to bring some offline thing that's an excuse for people to come out and just experience the benefit of it. And if they somehow get into the ecosystem of what we're talking about, that's great. Right. But otherwise, we're actively trying to put value out in the world. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot in terms of like coming up with an idea now, but
no. Yeah. Like whether it's in-person events. Yeah. There could be a world of like online events. Yeah, absolutely. Virtual stuff. There's like the community element. I think a lot of people who build audiences, they learn it. They then lead into courses, communities, masterminds, coaching, whatever. Yes. Sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off. Nope. But I like what you're saying about how do I be a good neighbor? I think there's a local element that it's so easy to lose sight of what's going on in the lives of people that we're physically connected to. And so I like the idea of starting there. Yeah. And then I think the online can help inspire and vice versa. But this idea of us somehow winning online first, I don't want to say it's hopeless. I don't want to have self-limiting beliefs about like, I can't have a, big social media following or whatever. But I also don't know how to do that and be connected to people's real needs. Yeah. It feels too much just like scheming for me to like go and research like, right. What do dads need? Right. Super important. What are the relationships we're cultivating? What does that look like? Yeah. So maybe that's next week. Yeah. All right. So the timer went off for my kids. Timer went off. So that means we're done here. That's the podcast. That's the pod, everybody.